What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? You are listening to the Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data your passion. This is your host, Dapper Data. I am glad to be back here, and I have a special guest. Okay, I always get these special guests on. I don't know how I do it, right? People talk to me. I like the network. Whatever it is, but I don't know how I'm able to get these special guests, right? So I have somebody on this call right now. If you're listening to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, you have to tune in and sit here for the duration of the podcast because this is going to be very, very exciting. Okay. As you know, I like to discuss a lot of things. I get very technical. Sometimes we talk about AI, talk about ML. Sometimes I do it on my own. But sometimes I bring in a guest like I'm doing today. Okay. And what I've done is I brought in programmers, I brought in data management experts, I brought in data scientists, I brought in CEOs of companies, right, to talk about data. But I've never brought in somebody that really hones in on that technical side of the management business and just can get really deep down technical with you if you want them to, right? That's the CTO of a company, right? And that's what I'm bringing in today. And I want to take it back to something that good old AI days, right? We always talk about, I did high level AI, right? I did an ML at different points, but I didn't come back to AI, right? And I want to do that, right? That good old artificial intelligence, okay? And when I think artificial intelligence, and I'm sure some of you all can resonate with me, I think about Blade Runner, right? I think about Westworld. I think about The Matrix, right? That red pill or blue pill. All right. I think about Star Wars and Star Trek, right? Are we there yet? Probably not. I don't know. but, but, right? It's fun to imagine it, right? It's fun to imagine that we're going to get there someday. And I think we are going to get there someday. And so I brought on somebody, right? CTO of a company, and I'll introduce him shortly. Someone that can help us out with where we are really with AI right now. Okay, from different points of views. Okay, we're going to talk about education. We're going to talk about religion. Right, we're going to get deep down into all this stuff. But we're focusing in on artificial intelligence, AI. Okay, audience. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to somebody, right, that is really making a transition and making an impact in the world in the community of data science, Slater Victoroff. Okay, say what's up, Slater.
What's up? Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So Slater attended Olin College of Engineering before pursuing Indico full-time career, right? And Slater is the founder and CTO of Indico, an enterprise AI solution for unstructured content that emphasizes document understanding. Okay, I'm sure he's going to talk to you a little bit about that, right? And what he's doing, right? Get a little bit deeper into that. But it's interesting because Slater has been in this industry for a while. All right, Slater has been building machine learning solutions for startup governments as well. And as you all know, I'm deep into the government, so I'm gonna have to pick his brain after this or bug him to death to figure out how we can implement AI into government. 'Cause in my eyes, right, we haven't talked about this later, but in my eyes, right, the government's so far behind on
oh,
some of
you're
this
not.
stuff, right?
Oh, you're
And
not wrong. You're not wrong.
and we have to figure out how to get that, forward. But he's also been involved with machine learning with Fortune 100 companies for the past 7 years and is a frequent speaker at AI conferences. Okay, he's been building AI, machine learning, deep learning solutions for a long time for the past decade, and he's really involved with educating hundreds of business users on successfully implementing some of the deep learning algorithms through some of the simple frameworks that helps executives, right? So we're talking about CTOs, CEOs, and things like that, because a lot of times you don't see that they understand that part of the business, right? The deep learning and things like that, but he's been involved with being able to help educate some of those high level executives in that area as well. So from a business standpoint and technical standpoint, you can always talk to Slater, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the idea. No,
Yeah.
I have one thing that I like to brag about sometimes is I once explained convolutional neural networks to an investor using sugar packets.
What?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Oh man. So that has to
yeah.
be
That's a
something
party trick
that
for sure.
yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Because if I was just a CEO, and I'm sitting there, all I think about is business all day, right? If you come to me, start talking some type of algorithms, or you're trying to figure it out, I might say, you know what, you don't get my business, and don't ever talk to me again, right? So, but Slater, though,
I mean, it happens.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell them about yourself, man. Tell them what you're doing, man. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I mean, you did a great job introing me. Those are the high levels. I was Indico is a true dorm room startup. I kind of
Mhm.
fell into the AI space, frankly, totally backwards, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I was just like a young programmer, right? And I kind of took on a project that I didn't even realize was AI related at the time.
Mhm.
It was sort of in the natural language processing space, but it
Mhm.
was just love at first sight. Me and my co-founder started doing Kaggle.
Kaggle, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
So
all
me
the
and my
data sets and
co-founder
stuff
started
is
doing
using
Kaggle
Kaggle, yeah.
competition. Yeah, yeah. We
Mhm.
started doing Kaggle
Oh,
competitions together. That's how.
oh,
That's really how Indigo started, honestly.
right, right.
Yeah,
So when we think about those Kaggle competitions, right?
yeah, yeah.
Those are, if you're not ready, right, for it, should you jump out there? Would you say just say screw it and jump out there? Have you seen
I
people
you
that are,
you learn so much, like especially today. Like, don't worry about trying to win. Like back in the very early days, it was maybe a little bit different. But the thing is, you learn so much doing a Kaggle competition,
Mhm.
right? Is like, and it's worth it just for that. And that's something that I think Kaggle did a really good job of. Well, so they sort of like after being acquired by Google, now they've got that whole offering that's like Kaggle as an education platform, and
Mhm.
that I think it works really, really well at, because just like having cool new data sets to play with, having like long forums about like, oh yeah, this technique works for this reason. Oh, hey, check this weird thing out about the data. I mean, it
Right,
is
right.
it is a master class in data science. There's is like second to
Yeah, and I've learned a lot. I've only done one. I
none.
can't remember when I did, but when I did
But I
it,
bet you learned a lot, right?
oh man, I learned that. I probably might have been last place. I don't know, maybe. I'm
I
sure I have because I didn't care about winning, like you said, right? A lot of times you
yeah,
cannot care about that when you are trying to get better with things like this,
totally.
right? Data science,
Yeah,
data analytics, and you're trying to get deep involved. You got to jump out there, right? And
totally.
figure it out, and then you'll learn so much from just trying to do that.
Even just re-implementing a baseline, you learn
Mhm.
so much doing that, right? And I mean, like that, that's they might be basic algorithms, but like it doesn't matter, right? Like you're learning to replicate results, right? You're
Right.
learning to set up experiments, right? I mean, it's yeah. I think Kaggle I credit, maybe not single-handedly, but I think they deserve a lot of credit for kind of creating this data science revolution in the last decade.
I agree. I completely agree. All right, so audience, as you know, as you can hear, right? We have somebody that I might be borderline genius, right?
Oh,
On
I
the
don't know about
podcast,
that.
man. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about a lot, right? We're going to talk about well, first, I want to say what we're going to be discussing is AI, and more. Guess what? AI, right?
100%, 100%.
So,
Yeah.
so that's what we'll be talking about AI, right? Where AI driven decisions, things like that. Having a good time with that. But we're going to focus in on specific things within AI because these things are not talked about as much, right? Education, religion, right? Those are the two things we're going to highlight. And then also, we want to jump into for the younger crowd and growing up to maybe the older crowd and stuff as well, right? How to make STEM, right? That science, technology, engineering, math more inclusive, right? To everybody, to the culture, things like that. Like this is going to be a great conversation. So thanks again, Slater, for being on the podcast. So let's start off, and let's talk about education. Okay. You know,
100%.
now, when I think education, right? Every time somebody hears education, well, for me, think
Mm,
about back in the day, right? You got your K through kindergarten through 12th grade. You got your middle
mhm.
school. Well, you got your
Yep.
middle school, high school, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You hear all those things, right? At throughout that time, I did not think about artificial intelligence, right? I didn't think
No,
about any of that
no,
stuff.
not at
That
all.
wasn't, that wasn't taught to me, right? So
Yeah.
AI technologies are around us all the
Mhm,
time, right?
mhm,
They're
mhm.
shaping every aspect of our lives now. They're changing the world and process, and and it's booming, right? It's a booming domain that's out there,
It
and
really
it's,
is.
yeah, and it's obvious that AI has been like a tremendous aspect to many industries, right?
Hmm.
But they don't talk about education as much,
Yeah.
right? Helping teachers with like administrative tasks, maybe looking at like textbooks and course creations and things
So
like that,
so
and
here's
you
so
could
I'll give
thought.
maybe yeah so I'll give maybe so there's one side, I used to work at edX and Pearson and whatnot, and I think that there are interesting things about improved content understanding, but I actually want to highlight a kind of interesting impact of AI in education that I think is actually going to be much bigger and a lot of people aren't thinking about.
Uh-huh.
This is actually in higher ed,
Get
believe it
your
or not.
notebooks.
Yeah,
Okay.
in higher ed, a lot of people don't realize this, but so much of higher education and upper level academia is run by like a traditional publisher, like Elsevier and these journals, right? The publisher parish mentality, right? And these are you have to pay as a researcher to get your work published, and then it's not accessible to other researchers unless they pay into these incredibly expensive subscriptions, right? And it's just this very, very old school industry. It's incredibly hard to break into. And there might be a 1 to 2 year wait between submission
Hmm.
and the actual publication of your work.
Right.
Now, a lot of people don't realize this. AI has completely disrupted this paradigm.
Mhm.
AI does. I mean, so traditional papers don't cover AI well. And a lot of that is because the clip of research in AI moves so quickly that they can't wait for a year or two for the results to be published. So
Oh,
that's one big piece. The other big piece is that, frankly, academia has not kept pace,
yeah.
right? Is that curriculums have not changed quickly enough to reflect how AI has changed, and industry research labs have kind of risen up to take some of that burden off. And then one of the interesting consequences of that is that industry research labs are not beholden to the traditional publishers at all. Like traditional universities, they are 100%, but it's completely changed the dynamic, and it's actually what I hope this enables, right, is that this makes, and sorry, there's a couple of aspects of it, but I hope that this makes research generically more accessible, because it's something like 90+% of all the ML papers, right, you can just read free online. It's like
Hmm.
no other field can you say that, right? And almost half of papers, they're actually releasing code with the paper. So you, as an individual,
Right,
can
right.
replicate it, right? And like an AI, we kind of beat ourselves up when we're like, oh well, only 40% of papers come out with code. But
Mhm.
if you look again at everyone else, like that is an incredible rate. And yeah, I'd love to see it at 100%. But you know what I'd love more is I'd love to see every industry, or rather every field of research at 50%. So I think those are some of the most impactful changes I think we're seeing in education right now, right? But I think that I think that could really really change the game, especially in higher education. I mean, it's made research so much more accessible. And I say this to some people, I have met, and I mean, this is exceptional. Like, you can't expect everyone is going to do this, but it is accessible enough. I have met high schoolers that have contributed to the state of the art of research, right?
Oh,
Like with a $500 GPU, right? And like that's an absolute prodigy, right? But like the reason, and like they were studying for 4 years to do that, but the research is out there, right? Like the compute is accessible, and so
mhm.
theoretically, it is possible. Even though again, like that's absolutely a prodigy, but there's so few places where that's even theoretically possible, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So do you? I mean, this is crazy, because because I didn't even think about some of those things from that aspect from a higher learning, high education, right?
it's probably because I'm old know, so that's how I think of things. Yeah. No, and I mean, like, and I think there are also going to be bigger impacts at kind of younger education and the kind of accessibility side. But I think that it's sort of interesting because I think that those are probably going to be more incremental changes, right? That's like you can make teachers' lives easier, definitely, and that's helpful and that's good. And I don't mean incremental and bad. It's just like it's different, right? But compared to like changing the model of higher education, like I think that that could be really powerful.
Yeah, man. I agree, right? And I remember having this idea of when it comes down to education, right? You're looking at, especially with COVID happening now, right?
Yeah,
I'm thinking
yeah.
about how impactful technology can be, right, to change the world, right? If we could just do it expeditiously, right? If we could hurry up and catch on, just
100%.
everybody just change, right? Because I look at like teachers, right? Teachers are sitting there. I sat in a class one time with my son, my oldest son,
Yeah.
and the teacher that was there, she's sitting there, spending more time trying to tell kids to like slow down and sit down and don't do this and don't do whatever. This is
Yep.
when he was like 9, 10 years old. So that age, they're active and stuff. You got the boys are going crazy, the girls are going crazy, and so everybody's
Yeah.
just active, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, man, you know what? It'd be great if the teacher could step back and as the curriculum presented more on the laptops, right? Based off of their
Mm.
actual learning styles instead
Yeah.
of, and the curriculum is presented based off of the learning styles, right? And
So one
AI can drive that, right?
so one thing that's actually super cool here, right? Because I think that that's a transformation that's needed. I don't think you need AI for it though, frankly.
Oh,
Because
nice.
you look at the Finnish education system, and because it's exactly right. They emphasize play, right? They're like
Mhm,
play-based education is just better for kids, right?
mhm,
I think there's a lot of logic to that. Like kids got energy, like you're not going to yell them into not having energy, right?
mhm. Yeah,
And
exactly.
actually, and actually, Olin, the school that I went to, they sort of extend this into engineering education. They say like it should be fundamentally project based. Like you
Mhm,
learn so much more building something and creating
right.
something and like applying the principles as you learn them. So like I think that yeah. So I guess I think that can AI improve that? Yeah, but I think that also just like more competency based education, like more Montessori schools, right? I think that
Mhm, mhm.
education in the U.S. is not in a great place,
It's not at
you know.
all. It's not at
And
all.
yeah, I think there's a lot of improvements. I think AI can help, but I think it's it's a part of a bigger recipe.
Right. What about like customized like textbooks and course creations and things like
Yeah,
that?
I mean, this is a thing that I worked on a lot at Pearson and at edX as well. And
Mhm,
the two big issues are that so one of the really big issues, and this is something we can talk about in a little bit, is that the most effective education is fundamentally multimodal, right? And
mhm,
it's like very sophisticated and difficult to understand, frankly, right?
mhm,
And so the problem is much easier in higher ed, where you've got like really rigid kind of boxes, like really defined curricula and like well built out taxonomies of learning, right? So
mhm,
it's actually a lot easier at higher ed, which is why you see like edX and whatnot. That's why everyone kind of flocks there, and you have these like much better systems there. But then
mhm.
it's totally different when you look at like K through 12 or like anything below like higher math and stuff like that. And a lot of that I think is just because like it's multimedia, and like AI techniques are not, they can deal with pure text, right? But there's
Yeah,
not that much learning you can do through pure text. And on the flip side, a lot of it is just like content is king. So like
yeah.
you remix bad content, it doesn't become good content.
Right. That's true. I always say like if you're sitting there making bad decisions, it might be because your data quality is bad, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Oh man,
uh,
yeah. So I mean, I love talking about education because my oldest is 11. He's in school now. He's like right in
yeah,
the thick of things, right? We're thinking about middle school, high school is next, and then you got college and all that stuff. And I'm a big proponent of education. As you know, I talked about being involved with my doctorate in data science, and so
yeah.
just and not to say that you need to go to school or anything like that. It just was able to help me specialize in something specific, right?
Mhm,
Just be able to
mhm.
get rounded right there.
Oh,
But I always
totally.
say if you're not making a difference or you're not, if you don't have an idea of figuring it out, right? Just try to go somewhere just to figure it out, right, and do something.
Hey,
So